Welcome in, everybody, to Pac-12 football and beyond. I am Chris Landry, taking you through the world of college football with an emphasis on this show in the Pac-12. A lot to get through today. We're going to give you an update on the Washington State, and USC coaching searches. We're going to take you through the league and look at the rankings from last night and how it affects teams within the league. We're going to get into that, break you through the games, kind of how the overall power rankings look, and get you ready for this week. Is yes, we are just 2 weeks left into the regular season. Think about it. We've got this week. We've got the last week, which obviously we know is Thanksgiving week, which we're going to make some adjustments to the shows. I will be working all Thanksgiving weekend, but I recognize a lot of you are going to be busy with family duties. So we're probably going to change things up, maybe make just some of them podcasts, or we'll try to fit in some shows earlier in the week so that you can, because it's such a big weekend of football that we want to make sure that we get that covered for you and all the breakdowns as best we can, all the latest news and information. But you probably, for the masses, I know you're going to be busy with family duties. We get that. I get that. But certainly remind you that if you are, can keep up with your social media at Landry Football, certainly LandryFootball.com will have the latest on the coaching searches. I'll get into some of them, but a programming note at 5 p.m. Central today. I'll be doing this show now. Then we'll take a little break. We'll do the Big 12 football and beyond. At 5 p.m. Central today, as per usual, I'll be doing the Landry Football Podcast. We're going to break down all the coaching searches from TCU to Virginia Tech to Washington State, USC. The latest on LSU. We've got the details for you there. It's best to kind of put all the pieces together there, and so make sure that you don't miss that as we take you through all the latest there. We're also take you through the playoff rankings in the national sense, and get you ready for the games this weekend, college and the NFL. Reminder again, if you're listening to this show live, we would appreciate it if you go to LandryFootball.com, click on the podcast version, sign up for it. Tells us that you like the show, you want us to continue it. We'll take a look at that here in a couple of weeks as the football season ends. We want your feedback. And if you're listening to this show via the podcast, we encourage you to sign up for the Twitch TV channel. Go to LandryFootball.com. Do that. Check us out on Facebook, YouTube. But Twitch is the best way. That will get you notification when we're going to go live. And we're looking at some different options, what we're going to do with our shows. We're going to give you more and more football, but try to give you more of what you want, and maybe packaged a little bit differently. So make sure that you check that out. And then finally, want to remind you that LandryFootball.com is where you want to go to get all the film room breakdowns of what happened this past week, what we anticipate going on this week in terms of the news and notes. So we've got that out of the way. Want to remind you also about our good friends at the Daily Tip, to check those folks out. That's a 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern time show, wherever you get your podcasts, Odyssey, Spotify. We're going to more details on that in a second. So let's get into a couple of things first, and that is the rankings from last night and how it affects the Pac-12. We've said it now for a while. There's only one school that can have a shot at being in the national playoffs from the Pac-12. It is Oregon. We've also mentioned that it is going to be quite difficult for the Ducks to beat Utah twice, and that is what I think is going to have to happen. They have the loss to Stanford. A loss to Utah basically would take the Pac-12 out of it. Like, I feel the ACC is already out of it. I don't think that, for example, Wake Forest, if they're able to get by Clemson, a one-loss Wake Forest is not in it. So I think the ACC's out. I think it's going to be difficult for the Pac-12 to stay in it, because I think it's going to be awfully tough for Oregon to beat Utah twice. Now, the tougher one is going to be this week in Salt Lake. We're going to break that down at LandryFootball.com in full detail, but I can tell you that that's a tough place for the Ducks to play, and I think it's going to be quite the challenge. And if they were to lose it, I think it knocks them out. I do think the Big 12, a one-loss Big 12 champion, has a shot, but I don't think it's a great shot. And I think Michigan and Michigan State are going to be eliminated in the next 2 weeks. So to me, I think it's clearing up a little bit more than people might think in terms of who can get into the playoffs. More on that again on the Landry Football Podcast today. But Oregon is at 3 at 9-1. They've got Washington State last week, and then they've got Utah on the road this week. In terms of the overall race, as you know, looking at the Pac-12, Utah is already made it. They're going to be the representatives in the South. They're again, I because it is virtual certainty now. Oregon and Utah. It's going to be interesting to see in that game if Oregon's able to win it. What they're able to do in a neutral field. I think if Oregon, I know if they win out, they're going to make it, and they would definitely be deserving. A 9-1 team, even though they lost to Stanford, and you can look at it, and I'm not one of these, well, this happened, that happened. But when you're trying to partial up teams, this is a team that did beat Ohio State on the road, and it is a team that only loss was to Stanford without Joe Moorhead, without Kayvon Thibodeau. By the way, they beat Ohio State without Kayvon Thibodeau. I think that Oregon is absolutely deserving of their ranking, and I don't know that if they would stay ahead of Ohio State, if Ohio State runs the table, because Ohio State has two ranked teams coming up and a third one in the Big Ten championship game. If they're able to navigate all those three after beating a Purdue team last week that's been upset-minded all year long, and they handled them fairly well, at least for majority of the game. I think Ohio State could potentially jump to Oregon, but I think Oregon would still make it, along with Ohio State. And we'll get into the rest of it again on Landry Football. So that's a look at the standings. I want to get into the coaching search, and we're going to get into this with everybody here, all the teams, but we're going to talk a little bit the movement afoot at USC. The guy that is getting a lot of play is Dave Aranda, and I mentioned a while back I thought he would. Look, I think that they're obviously, with Mike Bohn as the athletic director, has an affinity for Luke Fickell, and I think would like to have him. Apparently has not made any progress towards getting him to want to come out to the West Coast with his young family. And so with that being the case, I think Dave Aranda is the clear favorite at this point. Now, Dave is also a guy that's very high on Washington's list. It is looking like it's going to be very difficult for Baylor to keep Dave Aranda, as I think Dave's going to have some real options. I don't think that LSU has done the best job of working the Dave Aranda angle, and I think Dave is a really good leader. I think that, first of all, Dave is brilliant. I think he's superbly organized. I think he is a very, very bright coach. He understands the game from both sides of it, offensively and defensively. He understands how to build a staff. I think there's a criticism of him in terms of recruiting, in that he doesn't come across as being dynamic, but I think he's calculating. I think he's methodical. I think he did a very good job recruiting defensive players while at LSU. And I do think with a really good staff, he will work at recruiting, and he'll work at evaluating, and he'll work at the process of developing relationships. It is not he doesn't like it, he doesn't work as hard at it. It's not a Mike Leach or a Dan Mullen situation with him. It's people equate great recruiters with this dynamic quipster personalities. Well, Mike Leach is kind of a goofy sounding, but people like him, but he's not a good recruiter because he doesn't work at it. Dave works at it, and I think it would be an absolute hit at Washington or USC or at LSU for that matter. I think he'd be really good. I think he's doing a good job at Baylor. I think the only thing is you'd like to see him. Timing's everything, right? I think you'd like to see him do it for a few years. Um, the y- you're not going to have that with him. He's done a great job at Baylor. I think he's done wonderful things in a short time. He's got a lot of California roots. He's got a Polynesian background as well. I mean, he's recruiting in all levels, and the contacts in all levels would be a really good fit if that's where USC wants. Um, I have not got the impression. And again, I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know if they could do a deal with Dave, and if they lose out on that or what have you, and Luke Fickell, where they would go, and who knows, things may change. But I've never got the feeling, while the media has talked about James Franklin as the guy at USC, I've never got that from USC. I've never felt from the USC folks that was a real factor. All the James Franklin talk has come from James Franklin's camp. I know that he's never been a candidate at LSU, and if he was, after my conversations and my recommendations to that group there, my feelings on James Franklin are not very good in terms of his ability to lead a big-time program. I'm not a big fan of his. And I just think he's, again, a media creation, and people have latched him on to LSU and USC. And I don't his sense that he was even on the radar of either one. Now, maybe the media throwing it out there and everything, I'm sure doing due diligence that these programs did look into it, look under the hood. But the reality is, once you look under the hood and once you do your homework and once you talk to football people, people that actually know what the hell they're talking about, he just doesn't stack up. So I don't know what that means for James Franklin. We'll get into the more of that on the Landry Football Podcast. But Dave Aranda looks pretty good there. With Washington, they feel like they can make a strong run at a big-time candidate. They have a lot of interest in Matt Campbell. They have to sell him on coming out to the Northwest. And I think certainly the facilities at UW are outstanding. That is maybe not the easiest sell. He's a Midwest guy, but I think he would have an interest. I think Dave would have an interest. I think Justin Wilcox would be willing to move from Cal. I don't think he's on their tier one list. I think Jay Norvell is someone that they would consider. He's done a good job at Nevada. Um, if they wanted to go kind of that lower tier, give the guy that's maybe not a little young, who's done a good job at a smaller program type of guy, Kalen DeBoer at Fresno State and Brent Brennan at San Jose State are ones. I think if they looked at coordinators, it'd probably be Baylor offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes, Oregon coordinator Joe Moorhead, more in him in a second. I don't think they'll get Kalani Sitake to look hard at it, but that might be something that they'll look at. And by the way, something that USC might turn to as well. A name to keep in mind. In fact, it might have been the name to keep in mind for this job. But as I said, timing is everything. I don't think the timing's going to work. I think Brian Harsin would have been very interested in this job. I don't think he's interested in leaving Auburn after year one. But if this were last year or he hadn't gotten the Auburn job, I think he'd be near the top of the list, and I think he'd be in really good position. And I think he'd like the job. I think he'd be a good fit. He also has the connection with Chris Peterson, and I think that's still a huge factor. And I know that Jimmy Lake didn't work out, but that's still, I think, it would have been a really, really nice fit for them. Over at Washington State, I will say this, that Jake Dickert is got a shot. I think how this team finishes, particularly in the Apple Cup, that matters a lot. He's got the team to play hard and to play well. I think he has a real chance to win this job, but I think he has to finish strong. I think they'll look at Jay Norvell of Nevada. I think Joe Moorhead would also be somebody that would, if they were going to go the coordinator route, would make some sense. But that's kind of the latest there. So that's a look of the Pac 12. We'll have a little bit more on these in the Landry Football Podcast, as well as the latest on LSU, Virginia Tech, TCU, as well on those coaching searches. So we've gone through the coaching searches, gone through the conference races. Let's get into kind of the where I see things right now inside. Let me throw this out to you too. Um, I do think we need to keep an eye out on what's going on in Tempe with Arizona State. Um, at this point, I'm not ready to say that they're going to make a move at ASU, but it is something we need to watch. I'll just leave it there. You know about the off the field situations, but they have really done a poor job, and the staff has done poor. Now you've got the athletic director that's clearly, he and Herm are locked in lockstep. But I think there's a lot going on there that there may be some signs that maybe some things might come open there. We'll keep an eye out on that, but just wanted to update you on that. As I kind of look at the matchup this past week, Utah was not real impressive. I know I've talked about how I think Utah's a tough match for Oregon. They certainly did not play one, maybe as solid and consistent as they are. Arizona made a play on them, boy. They made a run at them. It was 38-29. It's a 24-point underdog. Utah did not. I thought Arizona State went punch for punch with them. They answered Utah's opening drive. I thought both the quarterbacks started to move the football pretty well. Plummer caught fire a little bit and got the touchdown to Wiley that, you'll wonder a little bit. Now, Tavian Thomas was out for Utah. And remember, developmental teams, when they lose guys to injuries, it has more of a factor than the elite type personnel teams. But I think, after getting 225 yards in the first half, Arizona kept it rolling. Had a 62-yard drive to open up the second half, cut the lead to 21-20 with a field goal. Then Utah got the field goal, got the ball right back after 3 and out. Dalton Kincaid opened up, was found in the corner of the end zone. So Utah's up 31-20. And it looked like Utah was pulling away, and that was that. But then I was really impressed, and I'm not a fan of Jed Finch and this Arizona program and where it's going to be headed under him. I've made that clear, and nothing's changing that. But I am a give credit where it's due. Okay, down 31-20, I thought it was over. I thought Jets team showed a lot of heart, a lot of fight. They cut it to 8 on a 15-play drive, not just some fluke play, 15-play drive. After forcing a turnover defensively, and all of a sudden, they forced a punt. Nazir Bamba blocked a punt, and Ruddy Short ran it back for a touchdown after a perfect bounce. All of a sudden, it's 31-29. So you get a 15-play drive, and then upon forcing a punt, you get that. So that was really impressive. Now, on the ensuing drive, Utah milked over 8 minutes. Some big throws, rising on a fourth down conversion. They put the nail in the coffin, and it was done. But it was quite a bit of a challenge, and I am curious to see how this plays out. Arizona goes at Washington State. We mentioned how we think that that Coach Dickert has a real chance. This is a game that they need to win. That's a Friday night. And then in a primetime matchup, Oregon, Utah shapes up as the premier game in college football this weekend. I break down all the games inside the film room in the conference sections. This one's going to be one of the feature games that I will have in more detail. Oregon State rolled past Stanford. What a tough season it's been for the Cardinal. Outside of the win over Oregon, which the Ducks are kicking themselves over, and put them in a behind the eight ball a little bit now. Oregon State just rolled past them, become bowl eligible. They haven't gone bowling since 2013. Have the Beavers. It's the longest drought of any team in the Pac-12. With a win on Saturday, we'll live to see another game. Get a bowl game. Banged up Stanford team. There's no question about it. And again, everybody deals with injuries, but not everybody can overcome them as much as the others. So it was a you got thrashed last week by Utah at home, but the Cardinal would put their faith in Ari Patu, who was making his first start as Tanner McGee was out for the second straight week. And for the second straight week, Stanford had a tough time getting any offensive production going in this game. They could only muster 70 yards of offense and 5 first downs in the first half. Oregon State scored a touchdown on first and final possession of the first half. They took a 14-0 lead. Oregon State extended the league with the big 67-yard strike from Chance Nolan to Trevon Bradford. Patu found a rhythm. He completed 4 of his 5 passes, running for a 25-yard touchdown run to move the Cardinal into the red zone for the first time. And then freshman quarterback, they found Benjamin Urashek in the end zone. For a second, it looked like Stanford was going to fight their way back in the game, but Oregon State just took it from there. They put the game away with an 80-yard touchdown drive, then another touchdown off of an Austin Jones fumble. So it's what they've done. Oregon State has used a variety of players. They rushed the football very well by committee. They did it again against Stanford. Nolan had a solid day in the passing game. So Stanford gets Cal in the game this weekend. It's what they call it, the game. And Oregon is home against the aforementioned Arizona State. And again, which is a big game, particularly for Arizona State and the coaching health of that Arizona State coaching staff. Arizona State mounted that fourth quarter comeback to shock Washington 35-30. Washington came into this game much different look. With Jimmy Lake was suspended for one game. For shoving a player on the sidelines during last week's game. So he wasn't in the game. Usually it was this type of game where you lose, a coach is in trouble, you blow a lead, and you're going to make a move, they make a move. And there's some off-the-field issues and personality issues and recruiting issues that led to this move. But what was ironic is that Jimmy Lake didn't get to coach his last game. His last game, he was suspended for. It's kind of weird. Bob Gregory was the interim head coach, and they started out well against Arizona State. They outplayed them. The offensive play calling was much more creative. They had a lateral throw to Dylan Morris, some jet sweeps, some tosses, some screens, which you normally see in interim coach's role. Right? Let's spice it up. What can be worse than what we have right now? The defense got the ball right back with some quick 3-and-outs. But the offense couldn't sustain. They picked up only 2 first downs in their final 4 drives of the first half. Arizona State put together a drive into a goal-to-goal situation. Thought Washington defense stood tall at stopping Jaden Daniels on the 4th and goal to preserve that 14-0 lead. But then Arizona State get onto the scoreboard with the touchdown from Daniels to Hodges. Then they finish the half with a field goal to make it 17-7 at the half. So neither offense could really find that spark in the second half. But ASU had the opportunity when Davis dropped a lateral toss from Morris and Tyler Johnson picked up the loose ball, ran it inside UW's 10-yard line. It's those type of mistakes that were the killers for the Huskies. And Arizona State punched it in 2 plays later. The Sun Devils, had a 20-play, 81-yard drive that melted 9 minutes off the clock. They moved the change, and with a chance for the dagger, Washington's offense collapsed failed to get a first down. Arizona State got field position due to a short punt, and now they need the Huskies need a quick drive to put a touchdown on the board. Um, but then Morris was picked off and Merlin Robinson for a pick six, and so and then now they're in a position, Washington, to have to win a Hail Mary to win the game, and it just fell short. So it was one of those games where you saw that they had the ability to kind of get in it. And they just couldn't. The mistakes killed them. So Arizona State, as I mentioned, is going to Oregon State. Washington's going to Colorado this weekend in an early start. UCLA, 34 unanswered points. They blew out Colorado 44-20. Um, Colorado's at least find some offense. I mean, 29 points at Autzen against Oregon, and stunning Oregon State in double overtime last weekend. Good start in the Rose Bowl on both sides of the ball. They took a 7-0 lead. Alex Fontenot, picked off Dorian Thompson-Robinson on the next drive. The defense forced a 3-and-out, an interception, a turnover on downs. The Bruins came back with a quick touchdown. The only problem is that you got to have two solid halves, and Colorado hadn't done that all year long. Put up 20 points, 264 yards in the first half, limiting UCLA to 7 points. But then they completely fell apart in the second half. The Bruins scored a touchdown on each of their first 4 drives in the second half, put a fifth on the board. Phillips ran a punt return back for 82 yards. UCLA amassed 219 yards of offense in the third quarter. So it was, again, another sign of, yes, some improvements by Colorado in stretches, but just collapses again. It's going to be interesting to see what Carl's able to do in recruiting. This is going to be an interesting year next year. They are not of the mindset to move on coaches real quick at Colorado. But I think the Calderell hire got caught late with Mel Tucker leaving, and I think this is going to be a tough sledding for Calderell down the road. UCLA USC. Remember when that used to be great? That's a 1 p.m. game on Fox there locally. So Oregon dominates on the ground in the win over Washington State, 38-24. But they took care of business. I thought the Cougs came out playing well with Jaden DeLaura reaching Calvin Jackson, big catch. Ducks responded. Kayvon Thibodeau was very disruptive early, getting some tackles for losses, harassing the run game with Max Borgi. Anthony Brown took 3 runs over 4 plays for an average gain of 34 yards and 3 first downs. That Joe Moorhead's done a really good job milking as much out of this team with some tempo, some good blocking angles, some pacing. They're using the quarterback in the run game, forcing the defense to defend an extra gap. They've done a really good job coaching that offense and getting a lot out of this team. Second quarter, Brown was dominant on the ground, and he finished the game with 123 rushing yards on 17 carries. They even had a touchdown pass that was called back. So it was really, really solid performance. The first drive of the third quarter was a 56-yard kickoff return by Mikael Wright. It led to a rushing touchdown by Brown, and it's just what Oregon needed offensively. Washington State really worked the screen game as they normally do, very, very effectively. The fourth quarter, Dye kicked off with the 6-yard run for a touchdown. A lot of back and forth between the two teams, but Brown ran it in the end zone only to lose the ball. Washington State recovers for a first down. So, it was you had the next Washington State drive, as we've seen several times this year. Kayvon Thibodeau kind of gets the opposing offense in a bad way. That continued pressure was the real difference in the game. Washington State again home against Arizona this week, and as we've mentioned, the game of the week in college football, Oregon at Utah, number 24 Utah, and now number 3 Oregon at number 24 Utah. So kind of a look in the power rankings of the week. Clearly Oregon, clearly Utah, and then there's a drop there. And I would have to put Arizona State. Then I'd have to move UCLA up, but there's a significant drop. I would say a drop after one, a drop after two. And yeah, I did say that I think Utah's got a great chance against Oregon, but the situation, I think there's a drop after three. And I think it's UCLA ahead of Oregon State and Washington State. Then it's USC. Then it's Washington. Then there's another drop, and it's Colorado, Stanford, Cal, and then in Arizona. That's kind of how I see the power rankings at this point. At this point, you're dealing with Oregon, Utah, Arizona State, UCLA, Oregon State have all qualified bowl eligible. So 5 teams are bowl eligible. Washington State is not, one game away. USC and Washington needs 2 wins to get to bowl eligibility. Games of the week, and if got any questions before we head out, we'll definitely take those. Games of the week we've gone over this week. My thoughts are that Oregon is going to be a really tough matchup. I'm not complete with my prediction yet on it. As I said, I'm going to break down that game in detail. We'll have that for you. I do like Washington State's chance against Arizona. Arizona State, Arizona State at Oregon State is going to be a close one. Do like Arizona State speed a little bit more. Cal Stanford is a toss-up game of 2 teams that can't find their own way. Do like Washington to get one against Colorado. I do like UCLA at USC. And that's the breakdown of the games of the week. Again, we're going to update you on everything with all the coaching searches around the country as part of the Landry Football Podcast here at 5 p.m. Central. Top of the hour, we're going to get into the Big 12. We're going to talk about Texas's problems. We're going to talk about the Dave Aranda situation at Baylor. What's the latest at TCU and their coaching search? We're going to take you around the league as we do each and every week, breaking it down for you. So check that out. I want to remind you that if you're into sports betting, you know just how quickly the lines can change. And when you've got a lot riding on those odds, it pays to stay ahead of the curve. So before placing your bets, listen to the Daily Tip presented by BetMGM for the best betting analysis and information. They are fun, informative, and extremely helpful. A lot can change between last night's game and tonight's odds. The Daily Tip gives you an early look at all the angles. Hosts Michael Jenkins and Chelsea Messinger break down the big takeaways. Make sure you know everything you need to know to bet smarter. With featured guests like bookmakers, Odyssey insiders, BetMGM experts, you've always got a fresh take on the action. Your friends will be wondering what you know that they don't. Not that you have to tell them where you heard it. As much fun as it is to bet on the game, it's even more fun when you've got the inside scoop. Ready to bet with an edge? Tune in to the Daily Tip presented by BetMGM. Listen weekdays 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern on Odyssey, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. We encourage you to check out that LandryFootball.com for all the latest film room breakdowns of all the conference games, all the latest news and notes in our notebooks, the NFL notebooks, the NFL game breakdowns, the film review breakdowns. We've got it all for you there. So we're going to probably get to Oregon, Utah, may do a couple of more. Michigan State, Ohio State, and maybe Iowa State, Oklahoma is where we're thinking that we may go with some of the special additional features. But all of those games, as well as all the other games, are going to be broken down inside the film room by conferences. So make sure that you check that out. Check us out at the top of the hour for Big 12 football and beyond. And today at the Landry Football Podcast, again, taking your questions on anything to do in the world of football. Check us out, the Landry Football Podcast, at 5 p.m. Central Time today, this same channel. Appreciate you joining us. Have a great one, everybody.